Okay, I think I should go ahead and get started and introduce myself. I'm Gigi Marks Felsher, and along with Karen Rothbaum, she and I co-chair Women's Philanthropy of the Jewish Federation of Greater Indianapolis. Our Women's Philanthropy Steering Committee created the Common Thread series in 2019 to serve as a conversation among women who share a sense of purpose and community. In 2020, we had to have a pause to the series as the Federation's focus was really on raising funds and gathering resources to assist those that have been affected by the pandemic. And there were many affected and in many different ways. Our work on this front, we know, is not done as the pandemic is still continuing. And if you or someone you know needs assistance, please contact Lori Moss or her staff at Jewish Family Services. The contact information will be in the chat and on the screen at the end of the program. So 2021 gave us an opportunity to get back to some of our regular programming. And the Common Threads Committee wanted to do a pandemic update to our series In Doubt or Living Without, about food insecurity and hunger. Throughout the evening, we are happy to take your questions. And if you would put them into the chat, we will be monitoring them and will make an effort to have all of them answered by our panelists. Tonight, we're really fortunate to have Debra Luffer Atlas serving as our moderator. Debbie is a native of Montreal, Canada, and she received her PhD in chemistry from IU. She joined Eli Lilly in 1997 and was recently promoted to Distinguished Research Fellow, the company's most senior technical level. She has spoken on Capitol Hill as part of a pharma panel on drug discovery. At Lilly, Debbie has been an outspoken advocate for female and male scientists and is sought out as a mentor. She has been married for 29 years to Pierre Atlas, and she is the mother of two amazing humans, Mariah, who's 24, and Ari, who's 20. Since moving to Indianapolis 23 years ago, she has been involved in numerous Jewish organizations. Debbie has volunteered with the Indianapolis chapter of Hadassah and has served on the boards of the Jacobs Home, Congregation Shari Tefillah, the Jewish Federation of Greater Indianapolis, and the Haston Hebrew Academy. Both of her children attended the academy from preschool through 8th grade graduation. Debbie is also a graduate of the very first ATID program and most recently has served on the JFGI Jewish Learning Committee. She's passionate about women's philanthropy and is honored to be invited to moderate tonight's panel. So thank you, Debbie. We look forward to your helping us tonight. Women's Philanthropy presents a Devar Torah at the beginning of each program for the purpose of grounding us in the Jewishness of why we're here. Mary Gordon, a member of our steering committee, has prepared tonight's Devar, and I thank her. Following Mary, Debbie will begin our program. So Mary.
Thanks, Gigi. Hello, everyone. It is so good to see you all. I'm really looking forward to this evening's presentation. Just happy to be in the room with you all. So this week I went on a hunt for God. As I prepared for both my Devar Torah and the upcoming holiday of Purim, I realized he wasn't mentioned once in the entire book of Esther. Truly fascinating if you think about the redemptive tale of Esther risking her life, summoning immense bravery, and saving the Jewish people. How could God not be present or even mentioned when we consider Esther's heroism? Without God, how could Esther have had the courage to reveal herself? How did she step out of the shadows and risk a life of comfort and luxury, prioritize the safety and very existence of the Jewish people while putting her own life at great risk? Just because God's name is not mentioned in the book of Esther, does that truly mean he wasn't there? So many questions in so little time. The conclusion I came to was that perhaps he too was hidden, working through Esther, inspiring her bravery. Perhaps it was God calling upon Mordecai to speak to his cousin when he warned, quote, "Do not imagine you will escape inside the king's house, any more than the rest of us Jews. If you persist in saying nothing at this crisis, relief and succor will appear from another quarter, but you will perish, you and your family." So maybe God was there all along. Esther and Mordecai just needed to look into their hearts and the hearts of one another to find him. Mordecai's words gave me pause. Was his warning sounding the alarm for a literal physical death, or something I deem could be worse, moral death, death to the conscience, death to the soul? What, I ask, is more devastating than the failure of a heart to respond to the plight of others? I think that Esther realized that when one behaves heartlessly, they are traveling the path to lifelessness. In my hunt for God, I came across an interesting parable. It went like this. Two individuals were given an assignment. Identify your friends in the black of night. One was supplied with a flashlight. He was obviously able to identify his friends by shining light in their faces. The second did not receive a flashlight. He was compelled to identify his friends by listening to their voices and the sound of their walk. The first individual did a far superior job. Seeing people's faces is obviously far more effective than listening to their distant conversation or straining to hear them walk at night. The second person, however, developed a unique talent. Without a flashlight to illuminate his path, he trained himself to listen attentively. He developed a special sensitivity and awareness, specifically attuned to others and born of his concentrated listening. When the sun rose in the morning, the first person extinguished his flashlight. He no longer saw value in the small light in the glare of the sunlight. In essence, he had learned little besides how to switch on and off the flashlight to suit his needs. This experiment was an easy enough and rather futile task, and the first individual left annoyed at a lost night of sleep. The second individual, however, had developed the talent of recognizing people even when he couldn't see them. This talent, which he developed and perfected during that long and dark night, remained with him during the next day and the next. This parable identifies the importance of developing the ability to go beyond the surface to see what is hidden. We are called to be brave enough to switch off our flashlights and use our intuition to identify where there is need in the world. We must not rely on what we see with our eyes. Rather, in order to see God's hand, we must make the effort to train ourselves to see it, going beyond the use of our five senses. The burning bush and the parting of the Red Sea were pretty bold overtures on God's part, but in my experience, he's not always quite so flamboyant when he makes an entrance. On Purim, we are commanded to fulfill 4 mitzvot. First, we must read the Megillah. We revel in the joy of the Megillah reading. We take pride in Esther's bravery, and we all put on our party pants to have a good time at the close of a long winter, or maybe not. Second, we enjoy the festive meal with those we know and love. This task, of course, directed by Esther and Mordecai, and a throwback to the many banquets featured in the storytelling. The last 2 mitzvot are really where the heart of the holiday are. First, we give mishloach manot. We share gifts of food or Torah with others. These gifts are meant to bring peace and harmony to our relationships with others, a way to symbolically counteract Haman's plan to divide us. Lastly, and according to Maimonides, most importantly, we are commanded to give matanot levyanim, gifts to the poor. With all of this joy and merrymaking, there should be no one among us who cannot celebrate. We all bear the responsibility to ensure that everyone has the ability to complete this mitzvah. The poor and needy among us are rarely in front of the flashlight. Many of us do not encounter them in our daily lives. They are hidden among us, and we must rise to the opportunity to provide for their needs, though often those needs tend to lurk in the shadows of our own minds. God is in all of us, guiding us to care for one another, protect the weak among us, provide for the needy. We just need to listen to hear his voice. Today, we come together to shine some light on food insecurity during COVID. This Purim, more than ever, we must seek out opportunities to give to those in need. Maimonides says it is preferable to spend more on matzonot yablanim than on the holiday meal or mishloach manot. Quote, "For there is no greater and more splendid happiness than to gladden the hearts of the poor, the orphans, the widows, and the converts." While I believe the heart of Purim lies in the importance of making sure that we are inclusive to ensure that all have access and ability to enjoy the good things in life, this is not a virtue I believe should be isolated to this holiday. We should be conscientious and better attuned to the needs of our community, no matter the holiday or time of year. Maybe we need to practice our listening skills in the dark of night to be most useful in the day. I believe that we could all do better at responding to those hidden needs of others. I call on you all to ditch your flashlights and sharpen your senses. Don't wait to be called upon to give. Look for hidden needs. Listen for the voice of God in your hearts. Learn to identify and respond to them so that perhaps you can summon your inner Esther and have the bravery and courage to look deep into the face of desperation and needs of others right here in our community and enliven your heart by giving the gift of a more secure life to others. Thank you.
Yasha Koach, that was beautiful. You've given us a lot to think about. Really, very beautiful, beautiful words.
Thank you.
So as I said earlier, I'm honored to be asked. This isn't exactly my day job. I think you all heard that I've been a scientist for most of my adult life, although with a very, very strong interest in Jewish philanthropy, and I've been honored to be able to contribute in some way to the mission here in Indianapolis. Before we get started with the program and with the introductions, I just wanted to make basically some global comments about the topic, since I had to do some of my own research about it. I did a little bit of reading. I encourage all of you, if you have some time, to get some background on the topic of food insecurity. Embarrassed to say I didn't know enough about it. I still don't know enough about it. I think it's all of our responsibility, as Mary so beautifully pointed out, to learn more about what we can do for others and what the mitzvot are in order to be able to give to our fellow human. We're going to talk a lot about food insecurity and the right to food as people are struggling during this pandemic, which there were struggling people in our community before. Now it's even more so. So a couple of resources I found. There's actually some nice reading about COVID-19 and global food insecurity at the International Food Policy Research Institute, if you want to do some reading. There's also quite a bit of reading that you can do on the UN Council Office of the Humanitarian Culture. So I just did a little bit of background. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I just wanted to know, like, how long standing has this problem been from a human rights perspective? And was surprised to learn, I guess, because I don't think about this very often, that it's only been about 20 years, a little over 20 years, where the UN Council on Human Rights actually established the right to food as a basic human right. And I snagged this diagram out of Wikipedia, which isn't always the best source, but this is actually a good picture. It's a little dated. You'll see it's only as of 2011-12, but basically, colored space on this map is the United States. There is still no known right to food in the United States, even though in various parts of the world, they're working pretty hard on establishing that right. And so therefore, it's incumbent on all of us to do what we can in our local community in order to do the right thing for our fellow citizens. And this really brought it home to me, but just by looking at this picture at how far we have to go in our own backyard. And in honor of, or in really to commend the efforts everyone is doing, I took the liberty, it's almost embarrassing myself, so I'll just put it out there. I used to write poetry when I was a young person, which is weird for a scientist, but that was my hobby. And I haven't written poetry in a really, really long time. But after hearing that amazing Amanda Gorman, who spoke at Biden's inauguration, I was sort of inspired to get back to it. So I've just written a really, really short poem. So don't worry, I'm not going to spend 20 minutes of your time. But I call it The Right to Food in 2021. And it goes like this. In doubt or living without? Do I understand this right? Or is the right to food misunderstood? Complacency seems endemic, but today we face pandemic, with even deeper food insecurity during COVID, when sustenance means survival, not surrender. Now is the time to fight for the right to food for every Hoosier, for every human in security. So With that, I will stop and come back to the program and invite our amazing panelists. We don't have national celebrities, we have local celebrities for you here. I'll start with Crystal Haslett, who received a BSW from Rutgers University and an MSW from The Ohio State University, has worked as the school social worker for the Metropolitan School District of Washington Township since 1999. Mrs. Haslett began working at the district's McKinneyVento Homeless Education Liaison in 2005, which she'll tell us a little bit about, and became the coordinator of the district student programs department at the beginning of the 2012-13 school year. Mrs. Haslett held the McKinneyVento Homeless Education seat on the Mayor's Blueprint Council to End Homelessness from 2010 to 18. She has served as a member of the city's Child Abuse Forum and Truancy Advisory Task Force, and is an active member of the Indiana School Social Work Association. Mrs. Haslett serves on the board of School on Wheels and 91 Place, both local organizations working to address youth homelessness in Indianapolis. She's currently serves as the Washington Township's coordinator of student programs and community liaison. Lori Pott-Moss is a native third-generation Hoosier and received her BSW and MSW at IU. She started working in the Indie Jewish community in March 1984. She knew she wanted to be a social worker in the nonprofit world as a teen working with children at the JCC. Based on her close relationship with her grandparents of blessed memory, she discovered her passion working with the elderly, helping them to value their independence and life experiences. In 2006, Lori received the Frank H. Newman Award for Professional Excellence, which is a huge honor in our community. Having worked at JFS, the JCC, and now the Federation, she has a bird's eye view of the growth of our community and still loves her job. Lori sits on the inaugural board of directors for the Jewish Network of Jewish Human Services Agencies, an international board of agencies in the human services field from Israel, Canada, my home, and the US, representing Indianapolis proudly. She can still do the splits, just has to stretch first. Maybe she's doing them right now. The camera, we just cannot tell, Lori. From her gymnastics days, and enjoys doing mosaic work. Lori's married to Gary and cherishes her time with her mom and her granddaughter, Leora, and can't wait to travel to her happy place, Aruba. I think I know who you go with. She lives on my street. Okay, so Jennifer Vigran. Jennifer Vigran is the CEO of Second Helpings in Central Indiana's Community Kitchen. Through its 3 programs of food rescue, hunger relief, and culinary job training, Second Helpings provides nutritious meals for thousands of hungry children and adults each day, and has trained more than 900 unemployed and underemployed adults for careers in the culinary industry. Jennifer first discovered Second Helpings through her volunteer work at IHC and was a Second Helpings volunteer for 10 years before becoming its CEO in 2010. She has, be careful who you volunteer for, you might end up running it one day. She has served on the board of directors for IHC, the Federation, and the IRT, among other community volunteer roles. So ladies, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being part of this amazing program. We have a lot of questions to get to, plus we're going to encourage audience questions as well. So let's get started with some general questions for all of you to answer. We'll start with this one. Just what are you seeing since COVID began, and how have you and your organizations adapted? Why don't we start with Crystal, and we'll go around, then Lori, and then Jen.
Sure, thank you so much. And I feel like I should have added something personal to my bio, but I am the mom of a 20-year-old daughter who is in her second year at Northwestern in Evanston, Illinois, and a senior in high school this year as well, a son who's a senior in high school. So just wanted to add that. I felt like it was all business and I should have included that. But just to the point at hand, really, I think one of the things that we really noticed right away in the school community was the rapid loss, honestly, that children and families were experiencing. It went from that loss of school and, connections with their peers and friends and trusted adults at school, to losing family members who were becoming ill or hospitalized or passed away. And it was very, it was just it happened very quickly. It felt like that we just kind of noticed and experienced that loss, and definitely impacted the ability of families, children to access basic needs. When their caregivers were becoming ill, or, you know, not able to get to places to get food, or who was going to pay the rent because they couldn't go to work and earn a living. So I think that was kind of just what we noticed right away, honestly. And I would say that the school community really responded to that noticing by becoming even more reliant on our community partners. So our faith-based organizations, I might repeat myself repeatedly tonight as I say that, because we in Washington Township most definitely could not help our children and families access resources without the support of our faith-based partners. So I can talk a little bit more about how we kind of got creative with that, but I would say before the pandemic, we were pretty reliant on that relationship and partnership. And during the pandemic, that reliance grew even more.
Thank you so much. Lori?
Thanks for having me on this panel, and I love being with Jen and Crystal. We've had that interconnection for a long time, so it's nice to be on here with you guys. I would say for us at JFS and specifically Popsy's Pantry, it's been a year of pivoting and adapting and being creative and pivoting and adapting and figuring out how we're gonna make this work. We did learn quickly that we needed to do that, as we saw like a 50% increase in our requests and about 4 times the amount of food going out than we had prior. We really wanted to try and maintain our free choice pantry. We feel very strongly about that. And so we shifted to kind of a order based. So staff call each client, get their order, pack their order, and then the clients come pick it up, or for those who aren't able to get to us, we now have some delivery for that, which is a totally different way of doing things than we ever had. We increased our admin position because we had more needs and a lot more work to get that done. Our food budget went to $40,000. Our total budget for the pantry last year was 60, and now our food budget is 40. So, and some of that is because we've been able to expand. We now have chicken and ground beef and cheese and, you know, some limited frozen meals and some PPE and cleaning supplies. But we also received 5 grants that we had never received, you know, even thought of, all COVID related. And that's really been a huge, huge help for us.
Wow, that's sign of the times. Wow. Jennifer, what are you seeing since, and how have you
I
adapted?
need to give a shout out to what Lori's doing at Popsy's, because I work with a lot of pantries. I don't know very many who have managed to keep client choice through the pandemic. So that's really something very important that they're doing. For second helpings, we had to adapt from the very beginning. A second helpings meal is normally eaten by groups of people sitting around a table together. And that was the first thing we found out we couldn't do anymore. So overnight, we shifted to prepared meals served in microwavable containers and individually wrapped sandwiches. The need was really big, really fast. And I think you've heard that from Crystal in particular. Within a week, we were facing needs that already exceeded capacity. So we developed a network of satellite kitchens. These are locally owned restaurants and caterers working at or near cost, and they help to dramatically expand Second Helpings reach. We also added a home delivery service, something we never dreamed we would do. But this is helping homebound seniors, disabled veterans, and struggling households in quarantine that desperately need our help.
Wow, really impressive. So this sort of touches on what you just said, Jen, but what groups of people have been most affected? Is it possible to even say this group is the most affected, or is it pretty much every group's been affected to some degree and you have to determine how to prioritize their needs?
Oh, I'd say no, every group may be affected, but they haven't been affected equally, that's for sure. So just in terms of scale, we estimate that about 77,000 more people became food insecure during the pandemic. That's just Marion County. A lot of them are people in low-wage jobs. There are people in the service industry, they're hospitality workers, and we can't ignore the fact that race, which is definitely a factor in food insecurity in normal times, is an even bigger factor during the pandemic. Black households are experiencing food insecurity at a 50% higher rate than white households. And if you think about it's a combination of people who were already at the edge being plunged much, much deeper, as well as people who may never have experienced food insecurity before, but whose industries were just decimated. So it's, we knew very early on that there were people who were isolated because of their risk factors, but we also see throughout the community, there are large, wide swaths of people who are much more deeply impacted than others.
Yeah, Deb, I'd agree with that. I think for us, I mean, we're seeing a lot of the working and middle class households, like Jen said, employment industries are, decimated. People lost jobs, and they're not used to looking for resources and trying to be the person on the asking side, and that's been really difficult. We've also seen a huge increase with our older adults and our Holocaust survivors. A third of the Holocaust survivors in the Indy area now access the pantry.
Wow.
So we see a lot of that just with isolation. Folks used to get together for congregate meals. They used to go have dinner together. There was a social component and a nutrition, and then everything just stopped. So we've seen a lot with that in that area too.
I would echo all of that, and I would add that we definitely, there were new families that had never experienced reaching out to food pantries before or other assistance that were learning to do that during this time. And also just so many parents that are navigating this world without certain privileges and abilities, like just the ability to read in English or their native language. Many of our ENL families really, really struggling to just access information, even though many of us, school district included, translate information into their native language. Some of our parents don't read in their native language. And so not being able to have that face-to-face contact at school to have those conversations and get information became really, really difficult. And so I would say those are definitely some of the groups that were impacted even more.
So would you say that really the kids are sort of stepping up even more to be interpreters or liaisons between, the agencies and the school that can help them and their parents?
Absolutely. All that while navigating online learning, right? Virtual learning,
Right.
trying to be in class, but trying to help out their parents just survive, and also provide childcare for maybe younger ones who aren't in school. So definitely just lots of barriers there.
Wow. So Crystal, can you tell us more about this McKinneyVento work you've been doing? Because I don't know anything about it, and I understand that it's quite interesting, and I'm sure the audience would like to know as well.
Sure, yeah, and cut me off at any point because I probably can talk way too long about McKinneyVento, but McKinneyVento is a federal law that provides educational protection for children experiencing homelessness. It's a federal law, so every school district in the country has to identify a McKinneyVento liaison for their school district that is charged with certain responsibilities. So I am the McKinneyVento liaison for Washington Township Schools. And under this law, families qualify as experiencing homelessness if they are doubled up or tripled up with family members or friends because of loss of housing or economic hardship. We'll see that sometimes when we have families, parents fleeing domestic violence, or eviction happens, that we see that as well. Obviously, sometimes people will say, well, lots of cultures will double and triple up in terms of housing, and that is true. But with McKinneyVento, it really is about that economic hardship, or that the family has actually lost housing, and they really don't have anywhere else to go. And so it's kind of that temporary housing piece, if you will. That is the largest group that we have in our school district, and in most communities, doubled up, tripled up is going to be the largest population that qualifies under McKinneyVento. But then also families that are hotel dwelling or living in a hotel because they have nowhere else to go, or living in a homeless shelter, or unsheltered, if that's the case. So in Washington Township, one interesting thing about our just geographic area, and many of you already know this living in Washington Township, but we don't have affordable hotels in Washington Township in our geographic and our school district boundaries, if you will. There are a few hotels, but they certainly aren't affordable. So our families, when they are hotel dwelling, will have to leave the school district to when they're living in a hotel. Most of that for our community happens on the west side, just 86th and Michigan Road, if you will, kind of several hotels in that area. And so these families, students have certain rights once they qualify as McKinneyVento eligible. They have the right to immediate enrollment in the school where they are, or to continue at the school, what the law calls the school of origin, or where they were attending when their family was stably housed. So they have the right to maintain their education at their school of origin so that their education is not interrupted while the family is kind of dealing with this housing instability. The school district has the responsibility to provide transportation for that child to and from that location to their school of origin for the duration of their homelessness. They have the right to free and reduced lunch and textbook assistance, and more support academically, basically, if they're not, or whatever they're needing in terms of that. So that's McKinneyVento in a nutshell. I feel like we do a pretty incredible job, honestly, in Marion County of really identifying families and students that are eligible, and then making sure that children have their educational rights and the best we can are succeeding academically.
Well, fascinating. I knew nothing about that. Yeah. Are you finding that, back to your allowing your students to remain with their core school, does it matter as much now that we're doing so much online learning and you don't have to be present? Is that helping, or is that making kids more frustrated that they can't be with their friends?
That's a great question. I think that, you know, to be honest with you, our teachers, and I really just am in awe of teachers, period, to be honest. They have been the profession that has had to, so many professions have been impacted and pivoted and reimagined, but teachers have just been amazing in this whole thing. And the interesting thing is, these young people, they still want connected with their teachers that they, you know, that already know them. Teachers are just doing such an amazing job trying to come through that screen and still connect with young people. And it shows on the other end, because our young people are asking to still maintain that relationship with their teachers in their classroom and their friends that they see on the screen. And if anything, what it's done is kind of allowed that to maybe be just like a little easier. We've got some families that, you know, have had to temporarily find a place to stay in Anderson. And before the pandemic, it just wouldn't have been feasible for a child to be transported from Anderson back to North Central. But in this case, they were able to maintain that learning with virtual learning and, you know, finish at the school that they started at without being interrupted. So it's been kind of an interesting shift, if you will.
Great, thank you. So Jen, I have actually never personally volunteered at Second Helpings, although through my Lilly departmental philanthropy, I have been to Gleaners, and we did this, we packed these back sacks for kids so that they could take some food home over the weekend, just to make sure that they actually had some nutritious food before they came back to school. And those activities were done sort of as a competition. We got into a warehouse and we had teams and we were packing them fast, and it was a lot of camaraderie and a lot of, for the kids, but that would be impossible to do in COVID right now, right? Because of the proximity. So how have you changed the Second Helpings model, and how has your volunteer system changed in the way that you address needs in the city?
Well, you said it. There are many things that we used to do that we can't do anymore. And I know many of you have been to Second Helpings just as a visitor or as part of a volunteer group. And we relied heavily on those volunteer groups. They did most, between our regular volunteers and the volunteer groups, they were doing most of the cooking for Second Helpings. And both because of social distancing and because of the risk profile of many of our volunteers, we very quickly saw our volunteer base just evaporate. The groups, we couldn't have them anymore. So we were very grateful fairly early in the pandemic. It didn't seem early at the time, but it was probably about late April when the governor called the National Guard in. And we had National Guard troops with us, the last left in December. And we have also had to bring in temporary workers to help and work alongside our staff so that we could do what needed to be done. They are with us until we get enough volunteers to be able to resume our regular operations. But until we can stop socially distancing, that's really our biggest limiting factor is social distancing. We're used to putting people in a kitchen elbow to elbow, and that's just not possible anymore.
Yeah, I will tell you, just, we get messages. I haven't been to work in a number of months, but there are people at Lilly who go to work because you can't make medicine in your living room, right? So there are people that have to be at work. And I'm seeing messages coming on about, we did an audit of cafeteria fraternization. You're all sitting too close. But think about it, I mean, that's the nature of eating with your friends, right? You want to be close, your mask has to come off. So I imagine that, how do you enforce the mask wearing at the same time that you have to take it off to get the food in your mouth? Like, how does that mixed message get transmitted?
I'm glad I'm not the only person who goes around trying to get people not to be so close together. Part of it is, it's, I spend every day I walk around the building and I look around, and it's just sort of become habit to kind of keep an eye out for people who are too close together or whose masks aren't being worn properly. Our staff has been great about social distancing and about mask wearing. And we have empowered everyone in the building knows that they're allowed to tell anybody else that they're wearing their mask wrong or they're too close. Okay. And we've tried to create visual representations to get people, to show people just how far 6 feet really is. We put plexiglass dividers up where people eat. We're constantly making changes and tweaking things because you can't think of everything. And every now and then somebody comes up with a new idea or you see something somewhere.
Lori, so how about your use of volunteers? How has that changed with Pops' Pantry and just the overall JFS?
Well, obviously when March hit, everything stopped. There were no volunteers. Nobody was coming in the building, except, and I give all the credit to Julie, Rachel, and an admin person, and Christy, who have been in that building physically every single day. They never took a day since everything shut down. And I give them so much credit because then they became not only the staff, but also the volunteers. We depended on our volunteers for grocery shopping, buying the produce, stocking the shelves, packing, getting things together for folks, organizing the pantry. And when that stopped, it fell onto our staff. But thankfully, we have figured out a way that we are slowly introducing some of that back. We have some volunteers who are delivering food bags to homebound older adults and others who are homebound. They're picking up again at Costco for the donations. They are stocking the shelves. And one of the things I will say that has really been incredible is that there are volunteers who have kind of created their own kind of food or fun drives. There's a group of men who used to go out and have lunch every week, sorry. And one of them sent an email and said, guys, we're not going out to lunch every week. So how about if we send what we would have spent on lunch to the pantry? Because we can. And thousands of dollars have come in from this group. So something small, like thinking about lunch, makes such a difference. So we count on volunteers, and the community has been amazing in stepping up and helping us out. And truly, we could not do it without that.
You know what, it's the little things that matter, and that you're absolutely right. That's really inspiring. So Paula has been monitoring questions so that I can pay attention to what you guys are saying. And I understand there are several that have come in, and
Yes.
Paula, you want to go ahead and share a few questions?
Sure, I sure do. I've got three. I'm going to start with, I'll do one, and then you can just let me know when it's the next. This one came from Kate Hayward, and it says, would you please talk a bit about the additional expenses incurred with having to deliver your services as a result of COVID? So I don't know who's best to answer that, but.
I can try from the pantries and JFS in general. We have, in the beginning, it was a little bit easier to meet with clients because we could meet outdoors, masked, we could sit outside people's apartment windows. We got very creative. And then when it got too cold or weather was in the way, there was no way we could do that, and the numbers and all of that. So we actually converted an office in our building, put a separate door, took the window out and made a door, and have a table with the plexiglass, and everything is measured, and cleaning protocols, so that we are able to meet with clients face to face. If we need to. We're not doing, huge long sessions with people, but we are able to do that. So, there was, those kind of expenses. Fortunately for us, because the volunteers are doing the delivery, that's a bonus for us. We appreciate that. But our food costs have certainly gone up. I'm not sure if that's where you were looking, Kate, or if there was another question.
I was thinking about delivering service. I don't know. I thought I heard somebody's driving food around to deliver to families.
I think Crystal said.
Did you say that? Okay.
Was it Crystal or was
Jen?
We have a home delivery program.
That's it.
Sorry, Jen. Sorry.
So,
Okay.
in terms of raw numbers, what's COVID costing second helpings? It's more than $300,000 a month above our regular budget. To put that in perspective, our regular budget isn't $300,000 a month. This has far more than doubled the cost of our operations. The home delivery side is actually a partnership we have with a bunch of different organizations. It's 913 Sports, the Indie Hunger Network, Gleaners. This is a phone number where anyone who lives in Marion County can call, and they'll get a staff member who will sort of triage the call. If they can get to a pantry, they'll refer them to a pantry. If they need home delivery, they'll then talk about, okay, so tell us what your situation is. How many people are in the household? Can you cook for yourself? Do you have a stove? Do you have a refrigerator? Things like that. And then they'll figure out, do they need a Gleaner's pantry box? Or do they need prepared frozen meals from Second Helpings? And for some, Crystal mentioned the families living in motel units. They can't handle a whole week's worth of frozen meals. So we've actually purchased MREs so that we can provide people shelf-stable meals for those to help supplement for those who just don't have the freezer capacity.
You might want to, so an MRE is a meal
Oh,
ready.
yes, sorry.
That's a military term.
There you go.
Yeah.
Meals ready.
Well, I only know my husband was in the Army, US Army, and he used to say it. I was like, what is an MRE? So now I know, meal ready to eat. But
And you know what? They're not bad. We tasted them. No, so yes, these are shelf-stable meals that are packaged specifically in individual servings that don't require anything. You don't have to heat it up. You don't have, it's already cooked. You don't have, it includes the utensils. It assumes you have nothing. So that way we've been able to sort of cover everybody in that who might have various types of needs.
All right, we're having a bunch of more questions.
yeah,
One
I see one from
funding, and then there's a huge one here I'm reading from Noni.
I see one from Miriam Dance. So in honor of the fact that you're representing Spring Mill Ridge, myself, Miriam across the street, and I saw Esther's online. So Spring Mill Ridge represents tonight. Miriam asks, what changes have you made due to COVID that you would like to keep in place after the pandemic is over? So Crystal, how about you take that one? And if
I was just thinking one of the things that we really, that I really appreciate, and I'm proud of what we've been able to do, but it also is being grateful really for the partnership that we have with the food pantries in our district, in our area. We, before the pandemic, you would hear about food drives that we had done at some of our schools. And a lot of times we will get that food out to students in that school community, families in that school community, and then we would donate the remaining, food that was donated to us. But we had to reimagine, we had to shift. We couldn't have people coming and dropping food off at school. I had always struggled with so many of our families, us asking them to come to school to receive this donated food, and just the position that sometimes put some of our parents in who were uncomfortable with coming to school to acknowledge that they were dealing with food insecurity. There's just a level of dignity and pride that that was difficult for some of our parents. In our food pantries, on the other hand, that's what y'all do. Like that's what that's what you're there for, and do it in such a way that is so dignified for parents and families. And not saying that we can't do that, but it's just a different environment. It's just a different space, really. And so what we have been able to do now is, those food drives that happen at our schools, we're asking now for parents, families to donate food to Lori's Pantry, to donate food to other food pantries in our area to support them directly, because they are the ones who are directly supporting our children and families that are struggling. So that is something that I see us continue doing, and I'm really proud of us for making that shift.
Okay, well, there's a little side conversation I think you might be able to see in the chat between Noni asked a really good question about what the legislature is doing. I think it's maybe a little bit beyond the scope of what we're here to talk about today, but it is an important question. Do you guys sense this is mainly, you work in Marion County, if I understand correctly. So do you feel that the responses you're getting are Marion County centric, or do you feel that the state has its eye on you as far as what the needs are.
I'm sorry, I missed the last part of your question.
So do you feel that any help you're getting is Marion County centric, or do you feel you're getting any assistance from the state legislature?
We're not really hearing from the state legislature per se. We have developed some very good partnerships with state government and with city of Indianapolis during this, and the city has been incredibly helpful and supportive of the work we've been doing. I can say that we have the state has not only what I mentioned, we had the National Guard at Second Helpings. Those Guard troops were deployed at food banks throughout the state, not just in Marion County. Similarly, there were food supplies, MREs in particular, that were distributed by the state throughout the state, not just again in Marion County, as well as PPE. So there is a network going on, and we have frequent conversations beyond just the Marion County folks. We're talking to people throughout the state. I do think it's important to recognize that the vast majority of food resources that go to food insecure households comes from federal programs. It comes from SNAP benefits. It comes from WIC benefits. SNAP being what we used to call food stamps. The kinds of work that we all do is really important, but we're just filling in gaps. The really important benefits that are coming to these households, either through through stimulus benefits and other recovery benefits, or just the regular programs, are critical. And really, we're so helpful through the summer as and help to avoid what could have been an enormous human tragedy without them.
For the state of Indiana, it's interesting. Julie shared this with us last week. She heard it on NPR that 1/3 of women and half of men in the state of Indiana earn above what is considered a good wage. And a good wage is determined to be more than $36,000 for one person and a dependent. 1/3 of women and half of men in our state. Pretty powerful.
Remember the Wayback Machine? I think
Yeah.
that's from a different time.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to be wrapping up in the next minute or so. So it seems like now would be a really good time to ask you guys what the audience can do to support your organizations. Do you need additional money, volunteers, Amazon's wish list at Popsy? Like if you had right now, magically, you could snap your fingers and get audience contribution in some way through time or treasure, what would you ask for?
I'll go. I mean, we have an Amazon wish list that is updated constantly. One of the biggest things we're seeing is the need for cleaning supplies and personal hygiene. Several of the grants that we've received are limited to food. And so some of those other needs are still there. And when we get gift cards donated or treasure, then that gives us some flexibility to purchase what's needed at that moment because the needs do change. And we have our Passover food drive coming up. So I'll throw that in there too.
Good call.
And I would say continue to support the local food pantries. Again, that is where we are sending our families. That is who delivers food to families when they need it. We also do have mobile food delivery as well, but it's the food pantries that our families rely on and build connections with. And that's, I would just say continue to support them. But also I'll put a plug in for Washington Township just recently launched Purposity, which is an online presence, if you will, that connects those who have a need with those who want to fulfill that need. There's a couple of school districts in Marion County that have launched it. We are just the third, I think, to do so. So what happens is school social workers and teachers will become aware of a need that a child or family has, and they will talk with the parent about that and post it. Basically, we post it on Purposity. It's all very confidential, so there's no identifying information at all. But if you're a follower of Washington Township on Purposity, you can see when needs are posted and you can choose to meet that need. And then the item is sent directly to the family through Amazon. So there's no contact with anyone at the school. Unless we need to have it sent to school, we certainly can do that. We've been able to fulfill needs like beds, clothing for children and for their parents. So basic need items have been delivered right to a family's front door. And it's been a real blessing. So
I would say if you're ready and if you are able, we still need volunteers. And you can go to the Second Helpings website and you'll see there's a volunteer application. We are steadily having volunteer training and bringing new volunteers in. I will tell you that we are very, very careful, and the safety of our staff and volunteers is critically important. And I knock on wood and everything, we have yet to have any transmission of COVID at Second Helpings. And we are incredibly proud of that, but cautious constantly.
Yes.
And of course, financial donations are important to all of these organizations, all of the hunger relief organizations throughout our community, and advocacy. Because thank you, Miriam, for raising that. The work that we all do in supporting families goes beyond just food. A jobs program, a housing program, all of those initiatives are actually also food security programs, because it's about how struggling families make ends meet.
So if you read the news and you follow what's going on just in general popular press, COVID is here to stay. There's a vaccine or a number of vaccines. However, no one believes that probably in our lifetime is it going to be gone the way that, thank God, smallpox, right, was eradicated, and thank God this isn't that deadly. But if you have to look in your crystal ball, do you foresee a time where you'll return to operations pre-COVID, or will there always be an adjustment? And this is a predict the future questions. There is no wrong answer, but do you imagine that the way that you return to your operations will always be colored by the specter of COVID, or will there be a time you think you would get back to what used to be normal?
I think, let me share one data point with you. In 2008, we saw, not surprisingly, a huge spike in food insecurity in our country. It took 10 years for food insecurity to reach its pre-2008 level. So when we talk about struggling families and food insecurity, whatever happens to the virus, the impact of the virus is going to be with our organizations and our families for many, many years to come.
Couldn't have said it any better. I mean, the thing that COVID, I think, has taught all of us is that we all have vulnerable moments and we all find ourselves in need of something. We're not needy people, but we all have vulnerable moments and have needs. And it's going to be with us for a long time, a long time.
Crystal, did you want to add anything, or?
Right, well said. I would completely echo both.
Exhausting.
Yeah.
We all need chocolate now.
Yeah. Yeah. Chocolate is a constant. Thank goodness for chocolate. I agree with you. So I think at this point, Paula, is it okay if I kick it over to Karen to make some closing remarks? Is that?
Yes, perfect. Mhm.
Well, on behalf of Gigi and myself, along with our Common Thread Steering Committee, which are Jackie Barrett, Barb Leventhal, Debbie Pelletiere Blatt, and Lori Schankerman, we would like to extend really a sincere thank you to, first and foremost, our esteemed panelists. I mean, you give so much of yourself all day long at your job, and to continue to give of yourself this evening. Time is precious. It's the most important commodity. So we really do so appreciate you taking time away from your families when you give of yourself so much already. And to Deb, thank you. You did an excellent job. Your poem was beautiful, your insights, and just, I mean, I feel proud to be a part of this program tonight. So thank you all so much. And to Mary, your Devar Torah, oh my goodness. I mean, I don't know who could have not been moved by that. It really, having a heart, I think, is one of the most important qualities we can all hold near and dear, and to be reminded that at Purim, which many people see as a festive and celebratory holiday, and be reminded of the need to give of your heart, of yourself, of the fortunes we all have. Just, I'm grateful for the reminder that you gave us. So thank you so very much. And I'd also like to extend a thank you to not only Paula, but all of the JFGI staff. Paula, thank you so much for your coordination of the program, and to all the staff who helped execute it, we thank you very much. Margot has handed off the reins to Paula recently to kind of spearhead our women's philanthropy. And I think, was this your first big event for us?
Maybe the second, no, I don't recall, but yeah, it was great.
So thank you so much. And I also would like to remind you all that if you or someone you know, or someone you're concerned about might be facing either food insecurity, housing insecurity, please do not hesitate to reach out to either Lori or Jennifer or Crystal, whoever you think is the most appropriate person to reach out to, or myself and Gigi, and we can help point you in the proper direction to get people assistance. Because I mean, what's more upsetting than seeing someone go without food, without a warm bed at night? And it just, you know, housing and food are needs that should never be gone without. So please do not hesitate to reach out to any of us if you know that. On a lighter note, I would like to remind you all that we have 2 fun events coming up. We have Susie Weiss Fishman, who is the creator of OPI nail polish, and whether or not you're a regular mani-pedi person or you do it on your own, she's going to talk about how I believe she's talking about how she founded or co-founded this phenomenal worldwide brand, and kind of how that came to be, and how I think hopefully she's using those funds to do good around the world now. Also, we have Michael Solomonov, who will be doing a Passover cooking demonstration. And Crystal, you might not be Jewish, but it's phenomenal. So please join us for that, because it's
I grew up with a lot of Jewish friends. I had dinner at their home a lot. So I love it.
Always welcome for Shabbat dinner at any of our homes, or for any holiday, I'm sure. So thank you, thank you. And I'm looking to make sure I have not forgotten anything in my notes. Oh, the Passover food drive, thank you. So, which Lori mentioned earlier. If you yourself would like to donate, if you want to organize, Deb mentioned there were some of her neighbors on this call. If people want to organize neighborhood Passover food drives and pinpoint a captain to drop off the donations to JFS, captaining something always, in my mind, gets more donations and more people involved. So feel free to, whether you do it with your kids' classrooms, at work, in your neighborhood, whatever you want to do, I'm sure they would be most grateful. Lori and Rachel would be overwhelmed with gratitude for all they would get. And I think, did I get everything, everybody? I also just want to say that it was amazing to see such a wonderful group of women on this call. We have some people that we've seen at events before. We have some people who I have not seen at events in a while, and some who I have not had the privilege to meet. So we thank you for your time. It's taking time away in your evening to learn about these important needs in our community. And I always walk away feeling more energized and empowered about the things that I can do to help my community be a better place. And as I said before, walk away with the utmost gratitude for the selflessness that all of you do to make our community a better place. So thank you so much. And, you know, just keep going. I know COVID is a new avenue to navigate, and we appreciate all that you're doing. Everyone on this call also. So thank you. And, you know, enjoy your warm bed tonight and the food on your table in the morning. And let's hope that many more people can achieve that in the time to come.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
Thank
Good night.
you.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
you. Night.
So much.
Thanks,
Good night.
panel. Bye.